3 awesome candidates from Arizona's 26th legislative district, and they will correct me if I got that wrong. But I'm really excited. If you guys remember when I did the Millennial Roundtable back a couple months ago, Athena was one of the candidates we talked to then, and now we are back with her running mates. Their election is coming up, I believe it's next month. And, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, moving things forward, getting good people in office, making, you know, creating social change. Well, this is where it starts. It really starts at our state and local levels. So I will let the candidates introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the goodness. Because the ladies outnumber you, Juan, we'll start with you this morning.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Yeah, that would sound good. So my name is Juan Mendez. I am currently in the state legislature. I've been in the House of Representatives and done it for I just finished my 4th year. This year I'm running for an open Senate seat. I got involved in politics because I believe people from my background, I come from a background of poverty and you know, a lot of issues, domestic violence and things like that. But I'm only here today because my community wanted to see me succeed. My community invested in me with all kinds of workforce development, all kinds of resources that I feel are gone or cut to the point where people from my background can't do what I did to transition out of poverty. And it's only been a couple of years since I've been able to do it. And so I'm going back to the legislature to fight for the underrepresented, to make sure that we're committed to our communities, but also, I mean, I'll go with that right there. But I mean, yeah, so I'm running for the state senate this time, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hello. So I'm glad to be back on the show again. Thank you, Noah, for having us. So I'm Athena Salman, and I'm an Arizona native, born and raised here. And I'm running for office just because I love my state. It's my home state, but I'm also just really concerned with the direction that Arizona's heading. You know, every single year we see cuts to education, we see cuts to youth workforce development programs, programs that support our senior citizen population, and it's just not sustainable. And regardless of whether you're a child or a senior citizen or anyone in between, it's becoming harder and harder to be able to lead a dignified and decent life in Arizona. And so we really need to reverse these cuts. We need to make sure that we're putting people and community first over corporate special interests. And so I'm very excited to be running in the House of Representatives in Legislative District 26.
Hey, it's me, Isela Blanc. Thank you so much for this amazing opportunity. I got to watch Athena, a month or 2 ago doing her interview with you. Listen, I'm excited to be with Juan and Athena for a lot of reasons. I have been living in Arizona since the age of 10. Originally, I'm from Mexico. Between elementary and high school, I was undocumented, which I think is a really powerful story. It is part of my history. It's something that I have chosen to talk about openly because in the state of Arizona, a large majority of children under the age of 18 are of Latino descent. A lot of families, you know, there's this belief here in Arizona that a lot of these kids are undocumented, but that's not true. A lot of these kids are U.S. citizens. They have family members that have mixed status. And the reason I opted to get in the race is to be, you know, a representative for all Arizona families. But specifically, I'm a mom of 2 young adults, an 18-year-old daughter, a 20-year-old son, and I'm really concerned about education. My son was in kindergarten in 2001, and I have got to tell you, I have seen how all those budget cuts have negatively impacted our public schools and here in the state of Arizona, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it. Our state legislature is trying to defund or unfund our public education system, and over 80% of our kids go to public schools. So when you have a state legislature that is cutting and cutting and cutting education funds and funneling money out of public schools into charter schools and private schools, there is something seriously, seriously wrong because it is impacting all families, but especially low-income, Latino, African, Native American, and Anglo families. So really all children.
Awesome. Juan, I know that we had just a little difficulty hearing you the first time, so if we can do it again, that'll be awesome.
All right, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
So my name is Juan Mendez. I am currently in the state legislature in Arizona, in the House of Representatives. I just finished my 4th year, and I'm currently running for the state Senate. I got involved in politics a lot because of my own personal story, my family story, and our background, but also because I feel like people from my community, my background, I come from poverty, I'm a first generation American, I domestic violence growing up, but I'm only here today because my community invested in me. My community wanted to see me succeed. I was given all kinds of opportunities with workforce development, with educational opportunities and access to health care, child care assistance. A lot of those programs are either gone or entirely cut where they're not able to reach the population in a meaningful way. And so I'm running for office to represent the underrepresented, to get back our resources, our community investment back into our community. Again, like Athena said, we're tired of our resources being diverted to just fund corporate interests, tax incentives to corporations. We believe the best way to invest in our community is simple things like child care assistance, but also early childhood education. And those are the things that we're advocating for.
Great. Now, I know you guys have all mentioned childcare and education, and that is something that we did talk about a little bit with Arizona before, Athena. If you guys could just, yeah. So like, it's such a huge issue across the board. Like, so I'm right there with you. I have a soon-to-be 15-year-old and I have a soon-to-be 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. And so I remember early 2000s, I mean, there have been cuts and changes that have happened all over the country, but I know previously, while they're getting situated, Gisela, if you could just talk a little bit more about some of the child care issues you were mentioning and education issues you were mentioning that have transpired that is part of what's motivating you to run.
Yeah, you know what? It's a lot of things, right? I think my children were in 3rd grade when our public school system started to open special schools. And I naively enough went to a school board meeting asking a question, and the question was, why can't we just expect all schools in our public schools to be great? Why do we have to create these special schools for families that can then choose to pull their kids out of their community schools to take them to these traditional schools where they were asking for parent engagement? So what ended up happening in my own public school system, my kids' community school, is we lost a lot of students to that traditional school. And so that was kind of like the first wave of the different changes. And then over the last few years, it's been, it's just growth what's been happening, honestly. And I'm sure Juan can talk more about that because he's been serving in the state legislature for the last 4 years, and he can get into the steps of how we continue to create tax credits for private institutions, charter schools, and it's really negatively impacting our public school system and our kids, and it's just not okay.
Can I hear the question again? Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead. Hop in.
No, can I hear the question again? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I was just asking, since all of you in your opening remarks have all commented on how important education as just one area, education, childhood, early childhood development, childcare access is, to all of you. And like I said, Athena had mentioned previously that there have been certain changes in legislative cuts that have occurred that have really made the situation even more, I don't know what the word is, precarious in some ways, maybe even. So I just was wondering, just like if you could just talk about kind of what has motivated you, in that aspect. And like Gisela just said, since you do actually have legislative experience, can you just talk a little bit about the changes that have happened so far in Arizona, the direction you would like things to see, to go into, and just give us a little background.
Yeah, for sure. It's a big shame in Arizona that we wait until your families get into kindergarten before we start investing full scale into their development. We believe waiting until kindergarten to start taking care of a young person's educational career is a wasted opportunity. and leads to all kinds of inequalities throughout their educational career. And in Arizona, I mean, the environment that I've witnessed in the last 4 years is we're purposely underfunding our schools to the point that the school system had to take us to court and sue the state so that we would fund them accordingly. And that was just the first of many lawsuits the public schools are going to start bringing to the state of Arizona so that we fund them to what the law says. And a lot of this, like the reason the legislature would forego so much funding to our public schools is only to purposely keep them underfunded. And the attitude is that we like to believe that we have this illusion of choice where any family can just pick up and move their kids from one school to a private or charter school. And it's gotten to the point now where the Republican-controlled legislature and our Republican governor are creating all kinds of avenues where we can divert public taxes to help with the creation of charter schools, with the actual buildings. So they're going more and more to create this environment where we're pushing out our children from our public schools into money-making schemes.
Well, and you know what? I have to say one other thing, because I know Athena and I, we worked at a state agency known as First Things First. And so our voters here in the state of Arizona in 2006 had to create a ballot initiative that was specifically going to focus on the birth to 5 years, because our citizens knew that if we didn't do something about it, our Arizona state legislature was not going to invest in children and families. And so First Things First was created, so these programs and services are offered, you know, pretty much free for families that have children birth to 5, because all research shows that kids who are ready for the first day of kindergarten, it starts when they're born. And so that's just an example. And then here in the state, we are one of the few states that doesn't fund all-day kindergarten. And because of all these cuts, some school districts have had to go to 4-day school weeks. And I'm sure Athena can say more about that too.
So just to piggyback on the voter initiative, the other reason that the schools even had grounds to sue the state was because it was a voter initiative that made it law that the state legislature had to fund schools give them funding increases based on inflation. And so whether it's early childhood education and development, or it's our K-12 schools, the political will in the legislature just continually year after year is not there to fund education, to fund children in our community. But I used to work for Girl Scouts, and even though I lived in Maricopa County, which is where my district is located, I supported girls and volunteers in northern Arizona. And northern Arizona has a lot of rural communities, and I cannot get over the conversations that I've had with school district leaders up there, principals of small rural schools in northern Arizona, and the cuts that we see in the state legislature is just exemplified tenfold in some of these rural communities. I recall one community telling me, yep, we do school 4 days a week because that's all we can afford, and science is optional. Maybe we'll get a grant to, you know, bring that curriculum back to the classroom, but for right now, we just can't afford to teach our kids science. And I'm sitting there, and this is the epitome of zip codes dictating what opportunities you are going to have in life, because those kids did not choose where they were born. They did not choose which school they went to, but we as a society have an unequal and equitable school system in how we allocate resources and funding, because that's the system that we live in Arizona and in much of the country. Those kids didn't choose not to learn science. Our society chose for them. And that is just wrong. That's against American values. That's against our values. And, you know, as Democrats, as your clean election slate here in our district, and we think our youth deserve better.
And I also want to end this part of the conversation with saying that this isn't like hard math budget problems that we're up against. And it's not like Arizona doesn't have the investment. We have a giant rainy day fund. Our revenues are strong. We even purposely don't take in as much money as we could take in. And so these are choices that we're claiming that we have to cut back budgets on education. At the same time, we're creating huge tax cuts for wealthy people. We've pretty much gotten rid of our capital gains tax. We give huge tax incentives to corporations that don't need it. We were falling over ourselves to offer so much money to Apple as some kind of closing deal to get them some kind of plant here. But I mean, Apple's a huge huge corporation. They don't need a little bit of incentive that we can afford just so they can close a deal here. But the attitude is we don't even want to be taking in investment, because if we have investment here, then we have to be giving it to schools. So the legislature just hurries around to give it back to corporations.
And I just want to tag on. So when I was a university student, so when I started off at ASU, and it had already increased a couple thousand by the time I got to the public university, but tuition fees were less than $5,000 a year. And by the time I had ended the university 4 years later, the incoming freshman class were going to be paying over $10,000. Now, this happened, it's insane, but this happened because the state legislature every single year, when the economy crashed, made massive draconian cuts to our public universities. If you look at Arizona, out of all the cuts to states that states have made to their public universities, Arizona has made the most severe cuts to their public universities. But the thing that was peculiar in our newspaper, our main newspaper, Arizona Republic, they were talking about how, well, the cuts to education and healthcare, when you look at those dollar amounts, the same dollar amount was given away to tax cuts to corporations. Yet we were being told the funding's not there. We need to cut healthcare. We need to cut education. But it's literally taking money from one pocket that benefits all of society and just giving it to a select few corporate interest groups. And the other thing that I want to start doing, and I think we all need to start doing, when it comes to higher education, whether that's community college, whether that's going to the public university, when tuition goes up, we are not trained to think of tuition increasing as a tax increase on the individual person, but it is a tax increase because corporations are not paying their fair share of taxes, and wealthy people aren't paying their fair share of taxes. We, as middle class, as low income families, have to brunt the cost of education at a greater rate. And it has an impact on every other piece, every other sector of society.
Wow, that's a
yeah. So that's why when I was on the show a couple months ago, living in Arizona, we're ranked. It's always between 48 and 50 when it comes to education, and when it comes, so it's consistently the #1 issue, because we are ranked so low and because of the environment that our elected officials have created.
So I want to keep talking about more of some of the issues that are really heated and present in your race right now. But if we could just break it down, because I remember you explained to me before about like clean election funds and even how you guys are running mates, like just how that works. If we just give folks just a little background understanding on just kind of how your slate works, how the election process is going. Just give us a little background.
To put it into some kind of context, right, because everybody's state is different in terms of the legislature are organized. We are benefiting from the fact that our district overlaps, right? So our state has District 26, and it's the same for their House districts, right? So that's overlapping. And so that allows us to run together as a slate, right, as a team, where I'm running for the Senate and they're running for the 2 open House seats. And then there are 2 ways to be a politician in Arizona. This clean election system was created through Citizens Initiative, right? So we put it on the ballot and created this program as a way to remove money from politics, or at least money's influence, right? And so you can still be a traditional politician where you go out and privatize your campaign, and in Arizona you can raise up to $6,000 from any business, lobbyist, corporation, or wealthy person, and they don't even have to live in the state to contribute to your campaign. So that's the traditional way. And we believe that creates all kinds of conflicts of interest, and it leads to all of the corruption that people see in politics when we have to privatize a public good, right? Because we believe running for office and your campaign, your politician is a public service, a public good, and so it shouldn't be privatized. The same way we don't privatize police, We don't privatize fire. We shouldn't have to privatize elections. And so this clean election system says that as candidates, we first have to collect enough signatures, right, to be on the ballot, and then we have to go out into our community and find 300 people to give us $5 each, right? And then the state will match their $5 contribution and give us a total, individually, a total of $16,000 to run for office. And then we're allowed to raise at least $4,000 more, and then we're capped. So the total individually we can have is $20,000 to run for office, right?
Okay.
But in the primary, in the primary. But this totally changes the process of how you become a politician or like a candidate for office, right? Like this forces us to go out into the community and talk to voters. You have to have you have to have a conversation that sets the context, that creates some kind of connection for them to be able to contribute to your campaign, even with $5. It's a big buy-in from a lot of our constituents.
And it's more equitable. So I want to correct you. So the maximum contribution that a traditional candidate can take is $5,000, and I really need to do the math, but $5 is 0.01% of 5,000, 0.1%. Right, so your average family, your average mom and dad or college student, you know, your average person that lives in our district aren't the kind of people that are sitting on tons of money that they can just and give to elected officials to try and persuade them to vote one way or another. But when you look at $5, people get excited. They're like, I can contribute in another way. In addition to voting for you, I can contribute in another way that makes me feel like you're more accountable to me. It is true, we are, because we're not going to your traditional lobbyist, or we're not going to the utility companies or corporations to try and fund our campaigns. And so in terms of equitability as well, that has been a huge component, and that's something that people in our district get really excited about, and it gives them a lot of hope.
Right, so it renews democracy all around. Like, so the voter is more invested in what's going on and wants to see this succeed. But then at the same time, right, because our opponents can spend all their time on their phones calling people who don't even have to live in Arizona to beg them for money, while we had to go out and build a relationship, right? So it's making better politicians, right? We believe where you get your money from influences what kind of politician you're going to be. So that's one of the big issues that our district is facing right now. We are in a primary against other Democrats who have privatized their campaign, right? And we believe that I mean, like, on the big scheme of things, there's only so much money that's available to go out there and raise money from, right? If you're a liberal or a Democrat or whatever. If we have a community that supports this clean elections, that wants to engage with their politicians this way, we shouldn't be trying to raise money to run for office. It's totally against the idea of representation. It means those, you know, our opponents that have to raise money are going to have to be beholden to that money, right? It's always going to create conflicts of interest when they're voting, and believe if that eats away at the public trust in politics.
And, you know, can I say something too? I and Athena have never pursued political office, and I am not highly connected to very wealthy people or lobbyists or people with a crap load of money. Let's just be honest. And so for me, a normal everyday person who's out having conversations with voters, and we've spoken to over, just to collect $5, we had to convince 300 voters in our district to contribute $5. So that means we had over 300 individual conversations with people, and that's not including all the other people who signed our petitions, right? But going back to the fact that I would not be here if it wasn't for clean elections money, and that's powerful, because I represent everyday people, and that is the hope, right? To actually have normal people whose special interest groups are our children and our families and our vulnerable, adults. And I mean, the list goes on, right? Not special interests, not lobbyists. And again, to Juan's point, I would like to believe that the people running traditionally and getting money from lobbyists and special interest groups are not beholden to those groups, but money talks.
I mean, just listening to you describe it, I wish we did have more, more of that across the country, because it does make it more, it does level the playing field, because it is so hard often for, people from underrepresented backgrounds, for women to get involved if we don't have those special connections like you're talking about. And most of us, rank and file folks, we don't have, people lined up to throw us fancy fundraisers, et cetera. So it really does seem like it makes it more accessible. So that was great. Like, that was really great, because I was wondering, I remembered a little bit from when we talked before about how it all worked, but that was a great explanation. Thank you, guys. So just talk to me a little about what are some of the major issues that, and Juan, you can also speak from your legislative experience, what are some of the major issues that are facing you that are really motivating you in this campaign? We talked about education, of course, and it sounds like, clean election funding is something else that's really important, but what are some of the major issues that are driving you, and then, we can talk about some of the major issues affecting your community as well.
Well, of course, big pictures for me is the environment. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we're constantly running up against huge problems that we try to dismiss and play off like if it's not a big deal. For sure, we're constantly we'll have to worry about water in Arizona. Yet the legislature operates like we don't live in a desert. I mean, there of course is this wing in the Republican Party in Arizona that pride themselves on being climate change deniers, but that's not all what we're up against. There's a lot of, I mean, it's more than just like a purposeful ignorance. It's just a view of everything that we would value as a resource, everything that is integral to life in not just in the desert, but in this world. A lot of people view it as just a resource that needs to be taken out of the ground and traded for money. So we have to worry about everything from water and developments not having enough water, to people who are constantly trying to rip up the Grand Canyon and mine for uranium. We're constantly having to be vigilant against the people who want to cut down a lot of trees. I totally forgot what kind of industry that is. But they don't like, they're not satisfied with the idea of just going in and thinning the forest to keep it healthy. They want to take large tracts down, and so we can't allow that to happen, because that'll just dry out the soil and cause more fires. I mean, so of course the environment, but I mean, what other issues are you seeing?
And do you want to talk briefly about the Nestle?
Well, so I mean, yeah, and this just speaks to what we're up against. The Nestle bottling company, the water company, is going to be opening a water bottling plant in the middle of our desert, and so I mean, it's new for a lot of us, but this is actually going to be the third water bottling plant in our community, to make it even. Well, I believe it's one that's dangerous. But we can't afford to do this. But again, add more complications. They're going to actually be manufacturing the plastics to make these bottles, and the runoff from that, the externalities, right? With all the damage this is going to potentially be doing to our environment is just going to be tenfold on the fact that they're going to be taking out water. I mean, this just speaks to the idea that that people are not. We're up against people who don't want to do long-term planning. They don't want to recognize that we live in a desert, and so that is an issue that we're constantly up against in terms of how it affects the environment.
Go ahead, Athena.
What else is there? We also have a big problem with our child protective services. I mean, I think it has a different name in different states, but it's another thing that we don't fund for the results that we want. We have this crazy mentality that we are just protectors, and that we'll come in and remove and investigate and remove a child, and we only see that as our role as a state. We can't get people to think a bigger picture and imagine that we can prevent violence. For every $7 that we spend in investigating and removing children, there's only $1 that goes to preventive services, and a lot of that is, I mean, so the worst attitude that I see at the state legislature is that the conservatives believe that as a society we cannot afford to give preventative services to people in need because it'll ruin them and it'll make them dependent on government services. And so we have this hands-off approach, but the state is happy to come in and remove a child once there's already been violence and abuse, but where everyone is slow to help us prevent violence. And so that's a big, we're constantly having to invest more money into our child protective services because we're constantly removing children. The main reason that we're moving a lot of our children is not just the physical abuse that you would imagine. It is the abuse that's considered, I mean, it's still considered abuse, but it's neglect when people have to leave their children at home because they have second jobs or they just have no resources to afford childcare. And that's legitimate grounds for the state to come in and remove the child. So too many of our families are suffering from poverty that is making all their problems.
And to put it into context, in Arizona, a quarter of our children, so 1 out of every 4 children, a child lives in a low-income household, so family of 4 making less than $42,000 a year. And no, I'm sorry. That's 1 out of every 2 children. 50% of our children live in low-income households. 1 out of 4 children live in poverty, which is defined as family of 4 making less than $22,000 a year. And so, you know, Juan talking about the poverty, and then our Department of Child Safety just being completely overwhelmed. You know, it's all interrelated. And the 3 of us, we're really proud because the largest private sector union in the state endorsed us, the United Food Work and Commercial Workers, UFCW, and we're very pro worker rights and workers empowerment. In fact, I used to be a union shop steward, and so this is something that's really near and dear to my heart. And you know, so we look at the well-being of children, but we also need to look at the well-being of adults, because ultimately adults care for children. And you know, we've been supporting another smaller union, Unite Here, Local 631, in they're trying to unionize one of the local companies here, and the working conditions are just completely unbearable. They grind the workers, or they grill the workers into the ground, and you know, some of these people have been in the service industry for a very long time. Their bodies are already broken down because of the hard, strenuous work that they do. We have workers that told us that for years they've been paying into what they thought was health care. And then when they go to the doctors to use their health care insurance, the doctor's telling them, no, this is not insurance, this is not valid. You need to come back and show us the insurance. And then they go to the HR, and their HR is like, tough luck, it's insurance, go back to your doctor. And so they're being put in this spiral. And the question is, okay, so you've been paying for health care and you don't have health care, so what's happening to your money? You know, I've heard, so this other story is years ago, while I was a union shop steward, and in another shop, the company paid the workers so little, and their health care that they offered the workers was so unaffordable that during orientation, they literally gave the workers packets about how to enroll in Medicaid, in the state Medicaid program. And so these are not good companies. These are not businesses that are taking care of their workers. And if you're working in this kind of environment, even when you are working, honestly, you're working 1 or 2 jobs and still can't make ends meet, you're not going home and feeling great about the world. You're not going home and feeling empowered. You know, you're going home exhausted. Maybe you never get to see your kids. And so the environment that kids are then in all relate to what environments their parents live through outside of the home.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it sounds like we'll go back to the conversation we were having about education, about how there are legislative priorities and how we spend and invest money. It just seems like we were just talking about how they're giving tax breaks to companies that don't really need them, and yet the companies are getting these tax breaks, but there's no accountability. There doesn't seem to be like any demand that, okay, we're giving you these tax breaks, you're here, you should at least be treating your workers and the people that are, building up your corporate empire properly. Like, it's just.
Can I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
So I hit a door, and what was really interesting, and I think it's how we view it, right? And we need to simplify it. And I've simplified it in my way. Walmart, who employs quite a few Arizonans, as you know, do not pay a living wage. And a lot of times they do not hire employees full-time because they do not want to pay health benefits.
Yep.
So here in Arizona, we have about 6 million people. Close to 2 million people are on access. So when you look at an organization,
Tell her what access is.
which is the healthcare plan for people who Medicaid. Thank you. So I apologize.
No, you're fine.
And so what ends up happening is places like Walmart, who have employees who can't afford healthcare, who can't afford to make it with the income, end up applying for these programs, which are necessary for their families just to make it. And so what we taxpayers are doing is we are subsidizing Walmart's profit margin through our public programs. That's what we're doing. And so those are the conversations that we need to have, right? We need to start talking about how these huge corporations that refuse to pay employees a decent living wage, that refuse to provide good health insurance plans, just basic human rights, whether it's sick time, vacation time. We taxpayers are literally, what's the word? I forgot.
Like corporate welfare.
Yeah, we have corporate welfare. We're subsidizing their profit.
And the other thing, so corporations are, massive corporations are getting these, it's an unfair advantage, because then you do have small businesses, you do have mom and pops who are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to give their workers earned sick time. They're trying to provide their workers a livable wage. But it's increasingly hard for a small business to compete against these corporations that, as Isela outlined, as Juan outlined, as the three of us have outlined, they just get all these unfair advantages, and their advantages are rooted in exploiting workers. Circling back to the Nestle bottling plant, when they pollute because of the plastics that they're making, rarely does the corporation pay to clean that up. Rarely responsibility for it. So in every component, whether it's workers, whether it's the environment, corporations aren't paying their fair share, and then we as a society, we as taxpayers have to clean up their mess, and the returns on that is unhappy people, a sick environment, failing public institutions. So we need to hold them. I like what you're saying about the accountability, but the accountability doesn't stop at whether or not they got the tax break to come here. The accountability goes way beyond that.
And I actually read something this morning by an organization, the Arizona Children's Action Alliance.
Okay.
And they talk about how here in Arizona, it is people in poverty who pay the highest amount of sales tax. So the state of Arizona relies primarily on sales tax and property tax. And so when you compare somebody living in poverty, they're paying over $12 in sales tax. And I don't remember the figure exactly, but the people living above 5%, the super wealthy, are paying less than $5. Think about that. So literally, it is people in poverty who are contributing a lot of money to taxes here in the state of Arizona. And it's just really interesting. And again, we're not talking about the real numbers.
And interesting, I would also regard it as inequitable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about just like your community and the people in your district, what are some of the things that people are, as you've been going out there and building these relationships, what are some of the things that people are really speaking on or identifying as areas that they're concerned about? I assume there are probably similar things that you're concerned about, but what are you hearing from people like out in the community as you kind of build out this work that you're doing?
So we recently had a special election in around education, and there's a lot of people that are still a lot of people who are still confused, and a lot of people who are mad about the results. And so, I mean, it's a little bit of what we've been talking about, but it spells out a different thing that we're up against. So a lot of states used to have what was called a land trust for education, right? When the states would sell the land, they put the funds, the proceeds into a trust, and the interest would be used to fund education. We're one of the few states that still has their land trust because we haven't abused it. But we just had a special election to pretty much go in and start removing money in a way that would jeopardize the principle of our land trust, just to have some short gains of a little bit of money to put into our education. But again, this was going around. We had the money in our budget. We had the money in our rainy day fund. But the legislature didn't want to use that money to invest in our schools. So they went out and ripped open this land trust to take money out of there faster and to put money into schools. And we're hearing it's still taking a while for that money to trickle down and get to the schools, and it's not getting to all the schools equitably. Some schools are able to give a little bit of increases in wages to some of their teachers, but not all school districts are. And so a lot of people are mad about how that played out. But again, that just speaks to how people the legislature, the Republican-controlled legislature here, is playing politics with people and not just doing our job of funding our public institutions. And so people are a little up in arms about that. We also had a crazy primary. A presidential primary that's still sour in people's minds. So this is our first year, Arizona's first year conducting a presidential election without the Voting Rights Act on the national level, right? So, Arizona was one of the, I think, was the only state outside of the South that had to get pre-clearance whenever we made any changes to our elections. And the second that federal oversight is gone, we throw everything out the window of how we've always operated for presidential primaries, and did this disgusting move where we removed so many polling locations. And so we hear that a lot, where people are complaining about their access to the voting. And this is, I mean, it's no different than poll taxes from back in the day.
Right.
If you make it to where a person can reasonably vote, right? I mean, like from outside of work hours to where they don't have to stand in line for a minimum like 4 or 5 hours to vote. I mean, this is just voter suppression. And then people see it. People see it. I don't even have to frame it as voter suppression. People are already mad about how so many people were denied access to voting. So, I mean, we're constantly having those problems, and the public is educated. They know who to blame. They know the names of the politicians that did them wrong.
And people recognize that's one example of the presidential preference that went so wrong. But people recognize at the door that when it comes to funding education, when it comes to the disparities in access to polling locations, they recognize that the underpinnings of a lot of this is racism, and a lot of people have brought that up in the door of why is it that previous generations, being more Caucasian children in public schools, why did they get opportunities that now that the majority of Arizona public school students are minority kids, we aren't offered those same kind of help. And the other component too is, Arizona, we are a border state, and a lot of people, especially in areas in our district, like in Mesa and in South Phoenix, a lot of people do come from mixed status families, and they're very passionate, and they care about what the state is doing around making sure that people do feel safe and secure here. And Arizona has a healthy track system at doing that for everyone.
And so I hit a lot of homes in those lower income communities, and I've talked to a lot of moms, especially I can think of 3 moms between the ages of 27 and 30 with children 9, 3 months, and 3 years, and I asked them, what kind of future do you see for your child? Now, when I had my children, I remember holding them. I remember looking into their eyes and just imagining a world of possibilities. My children were born in 1996 and 1998, when things didn't seem as chaotic as they seem today, asking those moms and to hear their responses as they literally got teary-eyed and said, I don't know, scares the hell out of me. It makes me really sad. And what's even more frightening is this year our state legislature really held back on serious other budgetary cuts to education. And I can have Juan talk more to one of the things that they're probably going to bring back, and that's desegregation funding, which seriously impacts minority communities in school districts. So I'm going to let Juan talk to that, and that worries me.
So to speak to this, like I would have thought that I would have been surprising people with sharing stories of what our school system is like. When I'm not in the legislature, I'm a substitute high school teacher for our local high schools. And so like I was ready to go run around telling everybody how bad the school system was, but our voters already know it. I'm subbing for some classes. Last year, I started subbing for an English class in October, and they never got a full-time teacher for that fall.
And that's my daughter's school, by the way.
And they never got a full-time teacher in the spring. They just kept cycling through subs. And I'm telling this to the voters, and they're like, "This is your first time hearing about it?" I've been complaining about the fact that my kids don't have these kinds of resources. And so it speaks to, I want to bring up this desegregation funding because it's really important to put this into a bigger picture of what we're up against. So a lot of schools, after we first tried to desegregate our schools, a lot of schools were given funding to help alleviate their issues. And so we've historically been getting funding in Arizona since the beginning of the civil rights, when we started desegregating schools. But we have legislators who are upfront about trying to cut this desegregation funding. They are telling us that we no longer need it, that we don't have segregation problems in our school, and that it's unfair that these majority schools are getting more funding than another school. It's funding that is ridiculously integral to not just the schools being able to do any kind of progress, but just keeping themselves together.
Yeah.
And so it's a direct attack. Like without this desegregation funding, so many schools would have to just lose hundreds of teachers if we lost this extra funding, and they know that, and they still pursue trying to cut this funding.
And one of the things that we don't talk about too is tax credits, right? So in the state of Arizona, you can donate $400 if you're a married couple to your school as a tax credit to go to after-school programs. And I'm just going to use this as an example. So one of the schools in our district that is really wealthy has over or close to $100,000 in tax credit. Then my daughter's
Wait,
school,
but so that means that the $100,000 that didn't go into our school system and went directly from one community into one school.
right. And this is a community that already has a vast amount of resources, economic, et cetera. Then my daughter's school, which is predominantly a Latino African American school, we can't get any money. We're lucky to have like 20,000.
Their community doesn't file enough taxes to be able to claim this tax credit.
And I spoke to, the three of us individually, per candidate, we've knocked on over 2,000 doors, and then we have volunteers who are out there every single day. It is like 120 degrees in the.
It's hot.
Yeah, so we
soldiers.
Yeah,
soldiers working for you.
So one of the conversations that just really paints the reality of the day to day and really breaks my heart, and I'm never going to forget this voter, is she's a grandmother, and she's 60. And she thought she was nearing retirement, but now she's taking care of 2 of her grandchildren, and then there's, some of her adult children are living in her house. She told me there's up to 12 people living in her house, and they're surviving on her single income. And she's just overwhelmed. She's like, this is not the retirement that I pictured. This is not the future that I pictured. And she made it a point to say, and because my family cannot afford summer programming for my grandchildren. My grandchildren sit in this house all summer. It's too hot to go outside, so they just sit in the house all day, every single day until school's back in session.
And so this is a family that can't afford that tax credit, right? So their school can offer the opportunities that other schools can enjoy, but the state legislature still underfunds our community in terms of schools, right? And so then our community has to turn to the ballot and do a school override, like a bond, right? And so that means everybody in our community ends up paying more in taxes just to get a little bit more money into some of our schools. So these communities, it's based on property tax, right?
In fact, right now in the community that we reside in, it's our community and the federal government that spends more money in our public school system than our own state government. I believe they spend less than 40%. So we taxpayers are having, and that's where people get really frustrated, right? Because they see, especially small business owners, because they see their property tax go up without, again, understanding the bigger picture. Our community values education, so that's why we continue to pass these overrides and these bonds, but then our state isn't flipping their end of their bill.
Well, and the overrides and the bonds, when our schools were being funded, they were to provide supplementary programming,
keep classroom size small.
Yeah, small to enhance the school. But the legislature takes advantage of that, and now that becomes one of the integral primary sources of funding for our schools. And because it's done through property taxes, again, the equitability, the zip code that you live in, even if your community passes the bond or override, which some communities don't, and then those schools are even more worse off. But even if your community does, it's contingent upon how much the values of the properties around that school district are worth. So one school district might get a couple $100,000. One school district for passing the same kind of bond or override gets $1 million. It really depends on where your school is located.
Okay, and I have to get this out. And keep hearing me talking about this. So, Anoa, I got to tell you, in 2000, a nonpartisan group, Morrison Institute, out of ASU, came up with a report called 5 Shoes Waiting to Drop. 2000, 16 years ago. 5 things that Arizona needed to do to become an economically sustainable community. One of those shoes waiting to drop was education, where they really talked about education and the growth and how this community, because of the immigrant population, and we've seen economic benefits, right? Because when you have people, they're working, they're buying, etc. Then 2010, they followed up with a second report that focused on education called DROP. It aggravates me that these policymakers have had access to these reports for over 15 years. And you might think the information is outdated, but it's not. We continue to do the things that they highly recommend we not do, and they continue to dismantle our public school system, which they recommended that we really invest in, and they highlighted the things that we needed to do, and we're not doing any of those things, or very few of those things. But what we are doing well is we have over 37 tax credits to corporations, wealthy individuals, and that's one of the things they highlighted that we needed to stop doing, and that we needed to think about diversifying our tax bases for all the reasons we've talked about.
And the report specifically calls out the Latino community and Latino youth, and there's an educational achievement gap, and because that's our fastest growing population in Arizona, it's also our future workforce. It's our future everything. And so if Latino youth are falling behind at higher rates than any other ethnicity in Arizona, and they're the fastest growing number, then the sustainability factor, it's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. And so the report specifically also mentions that.
And as an asset, they said Latino youth are an asset that we need to invest in.
And so we're always talking about these reports. I mean, there's people who are constantly coming down to the legislature to educate the politicians on these reports. So it's not that we're up against ignorance, right? We're up against a radical ideology that just wants to starve the government so that there's less resources to invest in communities. And we're dealing with people who are mad about demographics changing.
Yeah.
And I want to say that the reason that the three of us can speak so openly about this is because we're clean election candidates, and we're not beholden to, you know, special interest groups that are perpetuating this environment, this system, this problem.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, you're going hard. You guys are going hard. Like, yeah, clearly.
Yeah, we
Just,
care.
just imagine if other politicians had access to this kind of funding, right?
Right. I mean, that would make a big difference. So what are, because I know we've talked about, and I can imagine some things, but what are some of the things, in addition to addressing the disparity in how the tax credits work, what are some of the things that could be done, you know, to lead to better results and outcomes in the education system locally?
So this ideology that we've been talking about, it isn't unique to Arizona, but I think one of the things that I heard about Arizona is that for too long, since we lost our Democratic governor in 2009, she was pretty much the dam for the floodgate of all the bad ideas, all the craziness, all the madness, right? So when we lost her, we lost, I don't know, I guess that dam. And since then, all these bad policies have just been flooding through. And so I think that's one of the things that is challenging about Arizona is we need more people on the left in elected positions so that we can actually stop some of this. Right now, and Juan should talk about it a little more since he's been in the legislature for 4 years, but right now the Republicans don't even talk to the Democrats about anything because they have a majority in both chambers and they have the governor position. The Democrats don't even have a voice, so it just becomes what can we stop? And you don't really get to be as proactive as you would want to really start addressing these problems.
I mean, so I feel like I love talking about that, but that's like a whole other rant and a whole other show about how we don't practice democracy. Like whatever you think democracy is, you know, I went to school studying and questioning why we practice democracy. And we do not practice democracy in the Arizona legislature. Now, I'm not talking about the difference between democracy and representative democracy. I'm talking about the idea that we don't include the people who need to be part of discussions, and we don't deliberate, like no deliberation at all. But what she's getting at, though, is I lost it because I mean that's a big rant to go into.
Okay, so
no, that's fine. That's fine. It's just that just ended up. I definitely understand that that is education policy, education changes. I mean, you know, being here in Georgia, I've lived in West Virginia, also states to kind of go near the bottom and do questionable things with funding. So I do understand, and that is a totally different conversation we can all have another time. But just go ahead, Athena.
So to make it better, though, and just elect better people.
So to speak to this, though, right, we are, we definitely don't want to give off this image that we're some, like, Don Quixote people, like, tilting at windmills. Like, this is not, we're not on the fringe or anything. Right. We are talking about a lot of potential. Arizona is the only state in the entire country that is poised to flip one of their chambers. Right, so right now we are a Republican-controlled state at the Arizona legislature. They control the Senate, they control the House, and they control the governor. But if the Democrats this election just win 2 more Senate seats, we'll have a tie in the Senate, and it'll be 50. And that'll stop the crazy in Arizona. If we win 3 Senate seats, then we take over the Senate, and I could probably get a committee chairmanship if we take over the Senate. And so that would be, you know, opening up a dam on the other side where I would allow so much, you know, legislation to be talked about, to be voted on. And so, I mean, to go into a little bit about this rant about why we don't have democracy in Arizona, like my conclusion of it, right? People have this image that Arizona is this red state, this conservative state, but that's only because the conservatives control the entire legislature, in that you never get to hear them say no to any of my ideas for legislation, right? So the conversation is totally framed and only focuses on their issues from their point of view. And when you never hear them say no to a progressive idea, you as the public never know that there's anything they're fighting against. or that there's another voice in Arizona. You only hear their voice. But that can change this year.
And you know what? It's kind of exciting because one of the things that has helped Arizona is back in 2010, we passed Senate Bill 1070, which was the Papers, Please. And what that did is it really engaged a lot of youth into becoming more involved. And so Phoenix has literally become like this really progressive city. And I think a lot of young Latino, African-American youth, people in poverty are starting to see, and then you look at the Bernie situation, right? People are having real conversations about social injustice and equity, and they're starting to become more involved. And I have a lot of faith in the millennials, absolutely.
I mean, well, and then what she's speaking about too is we're witnessing right now what happens when an entrenched power is losing their power, right? So they're lashing out at all the communities that they can go out to. The immigration bill that she referenced, you know, because we have so many mixed families, this was not received as just an attack on immigrants. This was perceived as an attack on our families. And so we were able to respond by organizing and bringing more people out together. We recently had an attack on LGBT rights, and again, that just backfired in the legislature space and just got more people organized and involved, bringing more people to watch the Arizona legislature. Just this session, our Republican-controlled legislature banned the media from being on the floor of the state legislature. Like straight up made them go through like crazy background checks in order to even be on the floor, and so they are running out of options. They are scrambling. They're desperate. They're not organized in some kind of like you know, monolithic you know, our Republican Party is fractured right now.
And I want to so to get back to your question of what can we do. Is we can be, you know, we still need to react to the bad things and try to stop it. Like that, you know, is worth the time and energy of doing because it hurts. In the short term, it hurts. But we are in it's the long-term battle, right? It's not just you know, what's going to happen a month from now, what's going to happen a year from now. And so what we've seen in Arizona, and the reason that we can potentially flip one of our chambers or even our U.S. Senate seat, you know, we can flip that to Democrat as well, which is huge, is because people are going back to their local community and focusing on school board races, focusing on city council races, focusing on, you know, state legislative races. People are really understanding that they need to be engaged in their own community if any long-term change is going to happen. And that's what we see in our state, and I'm pretty sure that's what we're seeing in states throughout the country.
I was just trying to tweet that out real quick because that was absolutely on point. I've been trying. I'm sorry. I do apologize, you guys, if you see me looking down. I'm trying to live tweet as you guys are talking as well. You know, it's Sunday. You know, Progressive Army is off today, so I didn't want to bother anyone. So I'm trying to do it all. So I'm trying to live tweet as you guys are talking too. So you might see your mentions blowing up a little bit. But that is a great point though. And I was going to ask you guys, what do you think people can do to kind of help? Because I really feel like we would have maybe more people if we did have clean elections, but also if people were actually involved, and there may be more politicians who are more inclined to listen to their constituency if people were actively involved in holding them accountable, saying, hey, look, you know, you work for me. This is what you ought to be doing. This is what is important to us. And I just think just giving people examples on how to be involved, you know, what it takes, because I just from what I've been doing over the past year, I have found that people just aren't even aware that in some places, I don't know how it is where you guys are, but in some places, even like your city council meetings are online. You can even do, you know, you can even submit comments. Like I know people who didn't know that they could email, you know, letters. You know, some people don't like writing letters. I mean, it's just, you know, it's hard because we are bogged down by day to day, and but those little things do actually matter in the long term. So
sure. I mean, an easy thing for us, so we're big picture people, right? But we're also natural organizers, right?
Right.
we're only doing this because someone organized us to be involved. I mean, for sure, everybody can reach out to our individual websites to sign up to volunteer. We're getting tons of volunteers offline through our websites. We're organizing volunteers at the door, right? So we're knocking on voters' doors and converting them into volunteers. And so there's a lot of volunteer opportunities. You can help us talk to more voters, right? And we'll help you.
Right.
This isn't just a thing where you're railing off our resumes and our bios, right? We want to organize people to take power back, right? And so
Right.
we'll help people learn their own story, right? We'll recognize that they have a voice and a power to communicate to the voters, right? So we're in this to empower more people, so that I mean, we're not just trying to get elected. We're trying to build a better populace, right? A more active voter, a more engaged voter, and so we have lots of opportunities so that we can turn you into like us. I mean, we are forward thinking in that we know that as soon as we get into office, our first responsibility is going to find who's going to replace us. And we're going to have to take care of that person and help give them opportunities so that they can get to where we are. And so, I mean, that's a big thing that they're always looking to help people.
And then, you know, and people can research in their local communities as well who else is running for elections, or who's running issue campaigns in their community, and get connected to that. One of the things that I got connected to shortly after college was our local unions, because our local unions were just doing incredible work to be progressive and be proactive about building the better Arizona that we want. And you don't have to be a member of a union to volunteer with the union, you know. So there's a lot of opportunities. You know, our election, we're obviously biased and like, hey, come help us. But you know, like, just keep researching what you're interested in, and just know there's a space for you somewhere, and your voice is needed. Every single person that has volunteered on our campaign, whether they come out only for one day or whether they're coming out every single week, multiple times a week, they have made a huge difference, not only for our campaign, but more importantly, connecting individually with that voters that they talk to that day. Like, voters, you know, when you have these conversations, and because we train our volunteers to really talk about their own personal story, it creates that connection with the voter, and they now have a face to why they need to care about this particular election and why they should have hope that things can get better. You know, and that's powerful. That's something that you won't turn on the TV and see, but that is real life conversation. Someone's at your door. And that's the power that we're talking about building. That's how we are at the grassroots level. Juan mentioned that the three of us come from an organizing and outreach background. That's what we need to see more of in this century.
And I'm gonna play it simple. Listen, when my son was in kindergarten, I decided to join the PTA. Mm-hmm. And I remember being in this PTA. It didn't look like me. I looked and was very young and the only Latina there. And I was really intimidated. And I wanted to leave, but it was a woman who looked at me and she said, "No, honey, we need thinkers like you. Do not let them intimidate you." And so I kept going back to those PTA meetings. I became president, but my job as a PTA president wasn't to sell cookies. It was to really inform parents. So when we talk about, like, parents, a lot of parents are working a lot of jobs and doing their best, but just being involved in your child's education, really asking teachers questions, really being thoughtful about what is happening just in that part, in your child's classroom. For me, that's where I started. And that's why I'm so passionate about education, because I have seen how I've evolved as just being an engaged parent. And so I'm simplifying it, but that's where the community organizing. I mean, I was that parent out there when I found out that they were trying to get rid of a first-grade classroom, and I was out there collecting signatures, not really knowing and understanding that I was organizing. But it's that simple. You know, it could be as simple as that, or joining a campaign and asking really thoughtful questions of the candidates. A lot of communities have advisory boards that one can join, and we need to start becoming more involved and aware. And sometimes it's just being at these board meetings for 2 hours and really impacting the community that you live in and understanding what's going on. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm excited to be working with Athena and Juan, because I have to tell you, it's been amazing. It's been an amazing journey. It's been a hell of a 6 months. I'm not going to lie, the last month has been torturous because it is freaking hot. The positive is I'm gaining a tan and I'm getting thinner. But we have amazing high school and college youth, and when we sit down with them, we really want them to become their own advocates.
Right.
And the other thing that I would tell people is, and I love you tell a story because she went into a space and redefined what it meant to be in that space. The PTA was about one thing, and Isel said, nope, it needs to be about parent engagement and education.
Yeah.
And even in our election, not a lot of people run in Arizona as a clean election slate. Candidates will use clean elections for their individual campaign, but for us to be, in a competitive primary where all of us have challengers and say, nope, these are the forward thinkers, these are the progressives, and we trust each other to do the work, and we trust that we are going to be the ones to get this done and just completely be vulnerable in that sense. Like, we are redefining what an election looks like and what being a Democrat means. So every space, if you go into a space and you thought it was one thing and it's not,
take it over.
Revolution.
I love it. If it's not what you think it is, just make it yours. So just looking forward, okay, Juan, you've already been in the legislature, but if we get into the Senate, we get you 2 more seats, committee chairman position. What does that look like, though? Okay, we've already won. Primary's over, general's over. What is that first, few months or so? What does that look like for you guys? I know we're going to train your replacement because we got to build out for the future. What does that look like?
This is the hardest thing that I've had to learn, and I'm constantly having to relearn. Is that our environment is constantly changing.
Right.
So I feel like our first thing is just going to have to survey the land, because everything will be different. Who's in power will be different. When we split the legislature or when we take over the legislature, it'll empower all different kinds of stakeholders, right? Invested people in the community, organizations will finally, band together with resources when they see that they have an opportunity to actually engage in the legislature, right? So, I guess my first thing will be reaching out to a lot of those stakeholders and deciding who we want to empower and who we can work with to further progressive issues. Right, the first things that I feel like we have to put in is, preservation or legislation that allows for stability, right? And so stability in everyday people's lives and stability, for the whole state going forward. Our voters need simple things, like they need paid earned sick time, right? They need maternity leave for the entire family, for the both parents. They need a higher living wage. So those are the things to focus on, so that the people can deal with their problems, their individual problems, and once we help them solve that, then we can reach out to them to work on bigger issues. So that's one of my first things is helping stabilize our families. Right, there are a lot of chaotic situations. We have too many people right now. So we live in a desert, right? Right now we're averaging 108, 110 degrees. Too many of our families have to prepay for electricity in order to get air conditioning, right? So they're literally watching their dollars go down as they're just trying to stay cool in Arizona. So there's a lot of our families are too caught up in real problems that are happening to them right now, and so we're just doing simple things to help them deal. And then we're going to have to, make big changes. One thing that when we take power, we're going to change is campaign financing, right? Like how politicians raise money, how people spend money in campaigns. We've recently had our legislature pretty much rewrite our campaign finance laws, so those have to get rewritten again, or at least go back to what we used to have. And those are some of the big things we're going to be dealing with when we take over. I don't know if there's anything you guys want to jump in on as soon as we get there. But I mean, it's definitely. I mean, we want to do this right, in that we know we have to learn a lot.
Right.
I mean, just because we take power doesn't mean that we're going to start legislating everything we want. A lot of it is finding out what works and what's already working. But I mean.
That's an excellent point. I think that's an excellent point, because I think oftentimes, going back to the Don Quixote example, right? There is a lot of this, yeah, we're going on this great adventure, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do this. But I think what you're saying is right, though. Being practical, you do have to take stock and see what is happening, what will actually work. Yes, I do want this thing down the line, but what are the proactive steps to get there so that we're not in a worse off position in the interim? And I also like what you guys were saying, what you just said, Juan, about families struggling with just the most basic necessities. Like, I mean, it's not as hot here in Georgia. We get up to close to 100, but it's nowhere near as hot as Arizona. But I can understand that when we were talking earlier about kids not having opportunities, it is a lot to take if you're working all day long and there's a pool possibly if there is a pool that's even available for your kids to go to. Who is around, who has the time to even get them there when you're at work all day? And that's assuming you have access to a reliable transportation. So there are so many different things that a lot of people of certain means definitely take for granted. And I really do appreciate that you guys are thinking about those issues in that way as you're talking about these other bigger picture issues, because we do so often lose sight on what people are going through in the day-to-day life. So the stories that are shared are absolutely invaluable, because it does help put that human perspective on very real issues. This has been great. You guys are fun. So in closing, like what to voters, because I'm gonna chop this up for you guys and make sure you each get copies to distribute however you need to. I'll working on my editing skills today, so that's what I'm gonna work on this afternoon. But so like closing remarks, just what do people need to know? When election specifics, I know like mail-in ballots start in a couple of weeks. Actual elections like towards the end of August. So, kind of just closing remarks. What do people need to know to vote for you guys? Because they need to vote for you guys. Whole slate. So just closing remarks. How does that work with the election process? And anything else you guys want to add?
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely want to end with that. We want to hear from people, right? I mean, you don't have to live in Arizona, but I mean, we need encouragement just like anybody else. So I'm going to leave you with my website first, right? So it's Mendez, FORAZ.com, and you can reach out to me there. You can endorse us, right? You can opt in to volunteer. But we are ramping up our volunteer engagement when we're talking to voters at the door. Our ballots do drop at the beginning of August, right? So there's still a lot of voters out there that we need help to ID, right? To find out if they're going to be supporting us. And we're going to be starting phone banking any week now. So if you want to sign up to volunteer and you want to just be on the phones, you don't have to be in Arizona to help us with that either. So reaching out through our website, we can get you set up with an automated online dialer that'll help you talk to our voters. And then, so our election will be decided by mail, right? In Arizona, our voters get their ballot sent to them, and over 80% of the people that do vote in this election will have voted by mail. But once that's over, we're going to just focus and target on going after those poll voters and having conversations with them. So we're going to need help doing all that through August. And then, I mean, going forward, well, I mean, and then just to close on my, what I'm trying to do is I believe our success, our individual success, like whatever you want to consider success, is totally dependent on community investment. Like you can't succeed at anything unless a lot of people want you to succeed, unless a lot of people are invested into your success. And I think it's a shame that we don't have a government that views its most important resource, people, that way. We should be looking at everybody as an investment opportunity that'll benefit us as a society. And in Arizona, we need to step back from this. We have this perverted sense of individualism where you're just left to fend for yourself, and you sink or swim, and that's not healthy for a society. It's not healthy for a community, and so that's what we're trying to change. I don't know if you want to do a little closing with.
No, you want.
Go ahead.
And just redefine this year's election. You know, we talked about just throughout what we're passionate about: education, our families, our youth, our senior citizens, and that really starts with who are your candidates and where do they get the funding for their campaign. And so your Clean Election Slate, the three of us, we are really committed to the people. That's why we're going out every single day talking to voters in spite of the heat, and we're going to continue doing that throughout the primary election and the general election, because to us this isn't about this election cycle or the next election cycle. This is about the long-term vision for what Arizona can be and should be. And so we're committed to that, and we're going to fight. The three of us are going to fight, myself, Athena Solomon, Isela Blanc, and Juan Mendez. We're going to fight to make sure that we have the opportunities, that we have the state we deserve.
I am so grateful to be with Juan and Athena. I have learned so much from them. It's been an amazing journey. And I just have to say that I never, if you had told me a year ago that I would be doing this in 2016, I would have said, you are crazy, no way, no how. I never saw myself pursuing something this incredible, and it's only been incredible because I have two amazing people that each day support me. I have a group of young, amazing college and high school students. We have a group of amazing young people that are continuously supporting us. And every day when we're talking to voters, that is invigorating. It reminds us why we're doing this. It reminds me why I'm doing this. And so I'm just excited, and you know, everything Juan said, like our Facebook pages, Isela Blanc for Arizona State House, and yeah, definitely, we can definitely use that positive encouragement. So thank you so much. We appreciate you for allowing us this opportunity and for, yeah, just for being supportive. Thank you, and thank you to your listeners as well.
You guys are just doing great work, and I just think that, like you were saying, like it does help, even though I'm not anywhere near Arizona, it definitely does help to support good people doing good work, because that's what we need more of. And it's great to hear that you do value the encouragement from other people, because I would think that encouragement does go a long way. Other stuff will go a long way, help too, so I will definitely do a phone bank push for you guys as well. And I will